Welcome to the Elite Dangerous Universe, Commanders. This video is a summary of some work that was done earlier in the year, prior to Frontier announcing any news about Elite Dangerous. At the turn of the year, the Fdev share price was in the doldrums, the company was completing its redundancy programs, and had just released an interim report indicating their focus on CMS games, with no mention of Elite Dangerous at all. Community sentiment was correspondingly subdued. With that as a premise, I, along with my Discord community, a small and limited subsection of the wider ED community of course, wondered whether it was worth brainstorming a series of suggestions for Fdev that they might be able to implement into Elite Dangerous at speed. It is highly likely that Fdev have already considered the following list, and it is also likely that the wider community of players may have their own suggestions, or disagree with some of the ideas. We'd welcome your comments, either way. Since the beginning of the year, of course, Fdev has recommitted to Elite Dangerous in a fairly significant way, and these ideas may no longer be required. However, we thought they were potentially still applicable, and present them here for wider consideration. There were 3 criteria for the ideas to be weighed against based on our interpretation of Fdev's financial and strategic position as of the beginning of 2024. The ideas had to be cheap. Any ideas presented had to require either no or very limited development, asset design, testing, implementation or support. Thus the ideas could be implemented without requiring much in the way of budgetary changes for Fdev, and might be rolled up into the semi-regular updates that have been pushed out since Odyssey was launched. They had to be easy. They require no complex new capabilities, and potentially could be achieved without diverting highly experienced resource from existing priorities or other games. And finally, they had to be quick. They can be implemented in a matter of days or weeks, subject to whatever QA processes are required. With these criteria, new gameplay loops, new ships and new major assets were all out of scope, and thus the following top 10 list was generated. Number 1. Reducing grind requirements. There are several aspects of the game, most notably the acquisition of materials and data for engineering, which are excessively time-consuming and subject to RNG. The recommendation here is not to structurally alter mechanisms like engineers, as that would not be cheap, easy or quick, but to simply consider a reduction in the number of materials or data needed for a particular upgrade, or alternatively simply increase the spawn rate of said items. The benefits of this would be to allow more players access to higher capabilities, thus allowing them to partake in the higher tier content. Number 2. Look hard at time wasting. There are many time sinks in the game which could be given consideration, and whilst we would not be keen to detract from the core USP of Elite Dangerous, which obviously is providing a reasonably accurate facsimile of a full-scale galaxy, there are many areas in which the player has little or no interaction with the game for periods of many minutes at a stretch. We appreciate that my immersion is a key driver for many players, but this comes at the cost of potentially alienating new players who, from a purely business perspective, are the lifeblood of the game. Number 3. Consider providing existing players with a free or reduced cost additional profile. For many players who have invested many days, months and years into the game and moved their commander profile to a high rank and with a particular ethos and gameplay style, resetting a save is a very hard thing to come to terms with. Many other games provide at least a handful of options for a commander profile, multiple saves, and this facility would allow existing players to try other aspects of the game, for example, long-distance exploration versus bubble activities, without compromising their existing commander profile, which they would otherwise be reluctant to try. Potentially this could be a targeted option of a reduced price additional login to the game, if that's easier to accomplish. This would have the benefit of Fdev showing their appreciation of longer-term players. Number 4. Add ring racing for ships and planet racing for SRVs. All the assets for these exist in the game in terms of start and finish markers, basic course indicators and rings for spacecraft, which has already been demonstrated in the tutorial aspect of the game. Adding official circuits might prompt the expansion of an already enthusiastic but currently unofficial game activity. We're aware that there is an active racing community within ED, and they could easily be consulted for feedback on what the primary considerations should be. Number 5. Trail missions with story and lore included. there are a vast number of tourist beacons and story elements within the game, such as megaships, generation vessels, historical events, and so on. Without knowing where they are, these are extremely difficult for new players to find. A series of tightly scripted missions could be developed to take players on tours of these locales, linking them together and leveraging the vast amount of background detail that already exists in the game. Number 6. More NPC text dialogue variety. Whilst we wouldn't want to see the end of the wedding vows, the top 1% of all liners and the big haul threat disappear, surely after 10 years it's about time for some additional dialogue was scripted into the background ambience of the game. Federal, Imperial and Alliance flavour text could be generated, alongside independent factions or pirate activity, giving the galaxy a more lived-in flavour. Number 7. More pseudo-random things in deep space. Whilst encounters here are already possible, the suggestion is to add a higher probability of encountering wrecks, dead Thargoids, out-of-fuel NPCs and so on in the further reaches of the galaxy. These could include unusual and valuable cargoes not commonly found in the bubble, giving players more motivation to go out into the less explored regions. Obviously, any enhancement of the exploration side of the game would be extremely welcome. Number 8. Factionalized materials and cargo to a greater degree. This should now be considered in conjunction with the revised Power Play version 2 due later this year, but the initial idea was to promote greater loyalty to the main superpowers, with the suggestion that certain types of goods should only be available to ranking members within that superpower, giving more meaning to a rank that the players obtain. Thus, a commander with a higher rank within one superpower should gain privileged access to resources that are unique to that superpower. Number 9. Community goals not only based on cash or equipment, but rather on consequences. Rather than giving players the opportunity to gain a new paint job, some cash or equipment upgrades, CGs could be focused on event-driven outcomes, the destruction or salvation of a space station or spaceport, the death, protection or disadvantage of a significant character in the lore. This would drive engagement by giving players a stake in the outcome of how the galaxy evolves. And number 10. Add back in classic paint jobs and ships, and include additional decorative content and personalisation. Whilst we appreciate some in the community will disagree to their exclusiveness, we would suggest the consideration of reintroducing some of the classic paint jobs, such as the Wireframe series, and even the Cobra Mark IV vessel to the wider player base at whatever cost is deemed appropriate. This could be tied in with the promotion of other ARC's content. In the absence of actual ship interiors, it's still possible to enjoy sitting within the cockpit of your ship and venturing through the corridors of your own or other players' fleet carriers. Banners, wall hangings, chairs, consoles, futuristic tech equipment, and other decorative elements for fleet carriers could be considered as ARC's material. Finally, for ships, a HUD colour chooser could also be provided. This has been, of course, unofficially done for many years. And whilst this would require some development activity, it doesn't appear to be a vast undertaking to allow an official capability to do this in the game, allowing a more accessible customization of the interior of your ship. These ideas are presented for consideration and debate, and we'd welcome your thoughts. As ever, ride on, Commanders, at 07.